trend of doubling your market share. Discover in this episode how HR played a crucial role in achieving this amazing goal. We are delighted to have welcomed today in this episode of Asian Tide, Mr. Ibrahim Adzhar, who has 40 years of experience in HR, including 33 as the CHRO from big organizations across industries, from the airline companies to telecommunication companies. In 2004, he led the transformation of his organization from being a hierarchical company into a more flat company, way before Facebook, way before Google, and any companies from the Silicon Valley. In this episode, we are discussing his key lessons from his extended experience. He will share with us how important it is to have a long-term mindset and how it can be a game changer in leading your organization through the transformation. Keep listening to this episode of Asian Tide and feel free to share it to your colleagues and managers. Thank you so much, Adzhar, for being here and for accepting my invitation to Asian Tide, the podcast to drive the business growth in Southeast Asia. Adzhar, you are an HR professional with more than 40 years of experience, including 33 years as a CHRO in various companies in various industries. What advice do you give today to C-suites who have not yet integrated the HR in their leadership team?
There are still many companies which are traditional in many ways, where they see HR more of a role to manage and to administer and to service and to basically just keep things running. Many of them have not or do not see HR as a critical part of the organization. And what I would say to them is that I would say that you're not looking at things in the right way. What is really important is the fact that any organization will have a number of resources. And one of the key resources they would have would be their own people, their own employees, their own staff. And the resources that they have the most control on is actually their own employees, not their raw material, not their finances. These are all very, very tough and very competitive. And most of the time, the rules of managing these resources are also out of their hand. But how they manage their own resources internally, that is clearly very much within their power and their control. And if they have big ambition, they want to move forward, they want to leapfrog, they want to transform. The first part of those leapfrogging and the transformation have to happen with their own people. And to do that without having a strong human resource or human capital function, without having a strong CHRO as their peer and their colleague, and without having strong will and ambition and willingness to provide resources to make it happen, you're just setting yourself up for failure. So it's going to be just words. That sounds good, but down the road, you're going to look back and say, how come we didn't achieve what we want to achieve? And the critical part of that failure will be that they did not manage their human resources well.
Yeah, talking about leapfrogging within your career, especially with DG Telecommunications, the business growth went from 16 to 33% market share in 5 years.
Less than 5 years.
In less than 5 years. So how, as an CHRO for DG Telecommunication, have you contributed to this growth?
I was lucky to work for an outstanding CEO, somebody who was truly visionary, who had a very strong idea about what is it that he wanted to achieve, set up very clear goal, or rather very clear vision, and got the right people on board and got them to be excited about this journey. The journey started with the fact that we need to create a strong external branding. And external branding is obviously more than just the slogan or the jingles or the company song or the colors or whatever it is everything that the company offers to the market. Is the product, is the pricing, is the service, is the distribution. These all combine together to create the branding, and the external branding that you want to offer to the external customer must be the right one. If you're trying to imitate somebody or you're trying to become a me too, you're never going to be able to win. In order to deliver the external branding, the boss, the CEO, also recognized and realized and understood that you need to create a strong internal branding to deliver the external branding. And the internal branding is basically what we call culture. In our case, we were a telco, we were high tech, we were fighting in the mass market. There's a lot of technology, there's a lot of marketing, there's a lot of sale involved. And for us to fight against much more successful, bigger, much more entrenched competitors, we needed to do things differently. And we had a very nice catchphrase. We called it that we want to be different, daring, and dynamic. And everything that we do, whether it is the product, or whether it is something that touches the customer, or whether it is something that touches the employee within the organization, is always benchmarked again. Is it different enough? Is it daring enough? Is it dynamic enough? And given that as our direction and given that as our motivator, we did push a lot of things to be different, to be dynamic, and to be daring. Internally, for example, in 2004, we created a flat headquarters, not a single office in a headquarters. Everybody in the company, whether you're the CEO or you're the tea lady, sit at exactly the same desk on exactly the same expensive chair. Nobody has a phone on their desk because everybody's on a mobile phone, which is only fair because we are a mobile phone company. Everybody in the company, from the C-level to the tea lady and the company drivers, have exactly the same benefits. We did away with title, we did away with rooms and cubicles and everything else because we wanted to create a special organization. And we did. And to a large extent, we were successful. And that success internally is reflected in the external success of being able to grab revenue market share. I mean, these are real numbers. This is not just that our sales grow by 5 or 10%. If you're growing by 5 or 10% and the market is growing by 10 or 20%, you're going further and further behind. The real success of any organization is basically, are you able to gain market share at the expense of your competition? So we did that. We doubled our market share, which is unheard of for a company that was rather small, that has some of the worst assets in terms of spectrum and in terms of telecommunication towers and in terms of the distribution channel. And our share prices went up more than 6 times at the same period. And this is a true organization, not a hanky-panky organization where people can play around with the share prices and all that. So I think our contribution is the fact that the boss recognized that the internal branding, the internal culture of the organization must change, and it must reflect the journey that we are moving, and it must reflect the promise and the branding that we are promising to the external customers. I mean, you cannot be one to the customer and be somebody else internally. It just doesn't work that way. So I think it is the alignment and the willingness and the desire to make tough changes and tough decisions, such as hiring the right people and letting go of people who were not right, that helped to contribute to the company's success. Obviously, a lot of other good things happened also. The marketing people did a fantastic job of creating a new set of product and all that. The distribution people did an outstanding job to deliver the product. The technology people did an outstanding job to produce the product. But at the end of the day, everybody within the organization, regardless of their function, did a very good job.
Mm. Yeah, and you mentioned that it all comes from a boss that is visionary, that recognized that alignment is needed. But the problem is that today there's a lot who are self-made entrepreneurs who went from 10 staff to 150, 1,000 staff in a few years now, especially in the region, because the economical growth is going very fast. And they not always have this visionary sense. How can you convince them to change perspective and be more long-term and have a more visionary behavior and mindset?
I think a lot of it is just the fact that the logic is very simple. When you start with 5 people or 10 people and you grow to 100 people and 200 people, you probably still can control every single aspect of your business. You probably can know almost everybody. You probably can have a finger in the hiring of everybody who comes in and the managing of their performance and their careers and all that. But by the time you get to 1,000 people, by the start, you start having presence in geographies outside of your own. There's no way you can do that anymore. In the old days, when you start a business and you become successful, it doesn't scale up the way businesses scale up today. You know, if you want to go from 1 store to 5 stores or 20 stores, that may take 5 years. You know, and then it may take another 10 years before you can go up to 50 stores or 100 stores or factories. Nowadays, you can go from nothing, literally nothing, to becoming a regional or even a global presence within just a handful of years. So there's no way that you can manage your people, that you can have a direct impact on your people, because things will become just too big and you're going to become too busy with so many other things, especially growth related matters. So you need to have a strong function that will be able to expand what is it that you do, and that will be able to scale it up. In other words, industrialize the role that you used to play as the leader of the organization, who's able to touch everybody. So you need to have a strong HR function who obviously will be able to handle the operational side of things to make sure that people are paid, people are hired, people are taken care of, but who's also able to understand your vision and your culture and reproduce it to the 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 people spread over 1 country or 5 countries or 10 countries or all over the world. And that's the reason why at some point you would need to say that I need to have the right professional to run this thing for me.
That's a lot of changes that we're talking about, like transforming, driving growth. But the thing is that it takes a lot of will, of willingness. Sorry. It takes a lot of willingness to challenge the status quo, and it can be a little bit exhausting. How do you keep going, and how have you handled the pressure in your career?
I'm always excited about doing new things. I always like to feel that, oh, I think I got a measure of this, and then somebody come up with something new, something that I didn't realize, and I think, oh wow, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that, you know. And because I started my career in a rather traditional way, I thought I did well. I became a CHRO at 29 of a large group of American companies. And I learned a lot of the more traditional aspect of HR. But at some point, you know, I started to ask for, is this all, you know, getting instruction from somebody somewhere about what to do. And then I wanted to become my own boss. And I also wanted to work with really, really strong people who challenged me, who pushed me, who got me into rather scary position. And I managed to do that. I managed to find the right kind of bosses who did that for me. So on top of my own desire to always try something new, to always push for things, to always see, oh, what would happen? To always say that, yeah, occasionally you're going to screw up, you're going to fail, and you're probably not going to die because of it. You're probably going to be able to learn the right thing from it, and you're going to be able to become better and to move on. So that part of the personal drive that I have, coupled with the fact that I work with people who will drive you into areas that you're not comfortable with, I think, you know, ended up with me having a pretty interesting career, especially the second half of my career, and being able to leave a fair bit of legacy in the places that I have worked with, which now that I'm retired, I can look back with some fondness and some pride.
I see. So if I understand well, so it's a personal drive coming from your inner self, and you have also the people around you that are nurturing this drive. How do you said that you found your boss? How did you find, what was the process in finding your bosses that kept nurturing that drive?
At that stage, finding my boss was actually me being headhunted and suddenly discovering here I am sitting in front of somebody who asked me tough and unusual question. And then I was thinking that, well, this is going to be interesting. So even though I had a few options at that time, I decided that no, I think this is the one that's gonna be interesting. This is the one that I'm gonna really learn, and I'm gonna be able to contribute. So I think another person in the similar situation may be saying that, why are they talking about going in a different direction from what I've spent the last 20 years working on? Why are they talking about destroying some of the structure that I felt is so important to the organization? Why is the boss or the potential boss or the interviewer talking about going left when all my instincts say we should go right? So some people, given the same situation, may have made the decision to say, now this is not for me. But I came across that situation and I was thinking, this is interesting. Let's take it on, let's push it along, and let's see what happens.
I see. Yeah, you kept I feel like you kept a very fresh eye on every situations and feel follow your instinct on whether the person is right for you or not.
Yeah.
Um,
I must say it's not easy. The first time I met this particular boss, and he's talking about, I don't want to have any salary ranges. I don't want to have any minimum or maximum of salary. I don't want to have job titles. I don't want to have managerial title. I don't want to have job grades. I want to give the same thing to everybody. I want to do this. Those were very, very scary things for me. Honestly, I thought that shit, man, if I do this, the unions are going to be suing me, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life in court, or I'm going to fail big time and nobody will ever hire me again. So there was that trepidation because I was still quite traditional at that stage. But there's also the sense of excitement thinking that, oh, wow, nobody has done this before. Remember, I'm talking about 2004. This is even before Google or anybody has come up again. And yet we are talking about doing this kind of stuff. And I thought, let's have a go.
yeah, you went before Google went flat.
Back to the point about being different, because if you're offering the same thing to the customer, there's nothing unique about you. But if you start offering something different in your product and in your branding, and you have a different kind of internal culture to deliver that, your chances of being successful is actually very high.
Yeah, talking about difference, you're looping back to your career at DG Telecommunication, where the three values were different, daring, and dynamic. It really grew into you to be different, right?
I think it resonates within me because I think in many ways I always like to be different, and the fact that somebody verbalize it and somebody put it into words, and then I read it and I say, oh wow, this is something that makes sense to me. But to me, being different also has a different meaning. It's like if some people feel being different is that I must drive the most expensive car out there because nobody else can drive it. Well, that's one way of being different. My way of being different, as my friends know well enough about me, is that if everybody drives expensive cars, then I want to drive the cheapest car out there. If everybody drive brand new car, I want to drive the oldest car out there. If everybody fly first class to go to a new continent, I want to drive there over 2 months and suffer lots of misery. So being different is not necessarily about being prestigious or being glamorous or being ahead of the line. You could very well be behind the line, and then you say that, no, this is ahead of the line. What you call being at the back of the line is what to me the head of the line. So it's a matter of you deciding what makes sense for you and not letting social media or society or anything else define what success is for you.
Yeah, the definition, your definition of success has to come from you. Exactly. And not from the environment. But being different in a big organization can be scary. And we see today there's a rise of diversity and inclusion initiatives within organizations, but it's still very new. What are your thoughts on this new trend?
Well, I can only hope that it continues, and I can only hope that they are driven by sincere feeling among people and not just because These are the latest buzzword in HR or in organization in terms of diversity and inclusion. Throughout my entire career, I've always believed in inclusivity and in diversity. If I were to look back at my organization and my teams throughout the time when I was able to set up my own team, they have always been very diverse in terms of gender, in terms of nationality, in terms of ethnic group, in terms of the able and the disabled, and in terms of local and the foreign. I find it interesting to have it. I find it. I would rather work with different kind of people who are not like me than having a bunch of people who are just like me. I have a few very strong people working for me, and a few of them are very, very different from each other and probably may not even like each other or consider each other's best friend. But I realized that the reason why I was able to achieve a lot of those things is because precisely I have these kind of people who are, number one, not like me, and number two, not like each other either. I have some very strong, stable people who keep things running. And without them, things would have fallen apart. But if everybody's like them, then we would never have made progress. And on the other hand, I also have people who are gung ho, who are very excited about moving ahead, moving forward, trying out new things. And without them, we wouldn't have moved ahead. But if everybody is like them, we would have fallen apart. We would have just disintegrated. So I believe in the value of diversity, and it was something that I was pushing for, and I think it has done a lot of good for me in terms of my own life experiences. I'm glad that it is becoming more important, but I would hope that people would look at it from the real perspective and not just doing it because, well, that seems to be what is cool nowadays. Do it with all your heart because you really do believe in diversity and inclusion.
Mm. How did you do to bridge the difference gap between people?
That is the function of leadership. I think you're a captain of the team and you have somebody in the goal post keeping balls out, and you have somebody in front of the team to put the balls in on the other side. They are different people. They have different skill, they have different abilities, they have different temperament, but you need them because you cannot win a football match without a goalkeeper. Neither can you win a football match without any strikers and forward scoring goal. So you have to start with some self-awareness of yourself and know whether you're a goalkeeper kind of a person or you're a striker kind of a person. You need to be aware of the fact that if you bring in different kind of people, they will have different ways and different perspective of life. They may not necessarily appreciate each other. They may not be able to work with each other because of their different temperament. And your job is to find a common ground where they will feel comfortable working together. And very often the common ground is the vision of the organization, so that you may be a introverted kind of a person and the other guy could be an extroverted kind of a person, but there's still a common way for us to work together because we all believe in the journey and the vision of the organizations. That become the common ground and the rallying cry, and that people can latch on to, and that's the way would be the basis for us to work together. And of course, it can help to make things fun, and there shouldn't be a lot of laughter and there should be a lot of ribbing, and the boss shouldn't take himself or herself too seriously. Structure and hierarchy and all that are quite often hindrances that makes things difficult to work together. So you must be always aware of the fact that there's a lot of internal obstacle, especially within the Asian culture, because in the Asian culture, respect for position, respect for title, respect for age, respect for hierarchy sometimes become overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really do have an aggressive goal, an unusual destination that you want to go to, you must understand that these are obstacles that need to be overcome, which was the reason why we had a flat organization in terms of strata and hierarchy and working spaces and offices and all that, because we believe that if we don't do something to remove this obstacle, we will never become innovative, we will never be able to move forward. So in a large organization, you have a lot of diversity. I used to work with an airline, and within an airline, the pilots are different kind of creatures altogether compared to the engineers, who are different kind of creatures altogether, different compared to the cabin staff, who are different kind of people compared to the office staff and the marketing staff and the different staff. So there's a lot of subcultures within the big overall culture of the airline. And you must be aware of this subculture, and you must respect some of the differences in the subculture, because the differences are what make them useful. You want to have some risk-taking people within the marketing side and perhaps the HR side to move the organization ahead, but you don't want to have risk takers among your pilots. You want them to be boring and steady and predictable. Each of these has value, and it's our job to recognize where we need to retain the value and where we do need to make some difference, some changes rather.
Mhm. Yeah, you mentioned that you need to build a common ground that is nourished by the mission, the vision, and the values of the company. Um, how do you implement that common ground? I mean, how do you make sure that the whole team understand that common ground, live that common ground, and represent that common ground?
One of the most important thing that you can do to make sure that people believe that they share a lot of things in common is to hire right. If you make a wrong decision at the hiring, everything else becomes very difficult going forward from that point onward, rather. So at the stage where you are making the hiring decision or the promotion decision, you must be aware of the fact that this will have a tremendous impact on your ability to go forward. If you hire or promote the wrong person, you could be putting obstacle in front of you that will just make things difficult for you. On the other side of the coin, you probably have some members of your team who are also not going to be able to make it, either because they can't or because they don't want to. Somebody who has been enjoying the privileges of the old way for the last 20 years may not want to give up their office or their corner suite or their nice tables and desks and chairs and company cars and whatever. And at some point, you may have to make some tough decision to say that some of these people cannot be part of the organization because they're not going to be able to contribute, and they're going to be, in fact, pulling us behind. So I think that is a very important thing that sometimes people don't give enough care and thought about. Now, the next part of it is that within the organization, you have to be very clear about where you're going. And the way to be very clear about where you're going is to make sure that people understand it at the gut level, that say, okay, this is where we're going. We want to be different. We want to do things that our competitors don't do. We want to do things that other people haven't tried. It's going to be risky, but we have confidence in our ability to be successful. Some people tend to try to do this through nice words on PowerPoint slide and nice team building events and all that kind of stuff. They don't quite work unless the people trust you. Those things don't really work. If you can gain the trust of your people, then you may not have all of the fancy word and fancy presentation and all that kind of thing, but you would still be able, I think, to get them on board, because trust is extremely important. If you cannot trust your people or they cannot trust you, then you don't have a team. And whatever team you have to be extremely dysfunctional, and it's not going to be able to have the organization move ahead. And the other thing is, of course, what I mentioned earlier, everybody will have some opinion about how we go ahead. If they all are in agreement about the destination that we want to go ahead, they may have some difference of opinion in terms of the direction or the zigzagging that we need to do, or how do we deal with obstacle that comes along the way. And quite often, this would be very, very useful and very helpful, because after all, if you have hired smart people, then they're likely to be able to think their way through things, and they're likely to be able to be right also, quite often. If you hire dumb people, then they're likely to be wrong almost all of the time, but then they're not going to be able to help you along the way either. So it's about letting people grow, about helping them along the way, about using the stuff that you have gained, your wisdom and your life lessons and all that kind of stuff to help them to grow. I always like working with young people, or people who are young at heart. In my last job before I retired, the average age of my direct report was less than my career length. And that was amazing. So I have some very young, very excitable, very energetic people. And I do have some older people either, but as long as they are basically young at heart, that's good enough. Because there are some young people who are also old at heart, and they're not going to be able to help me in the journey that I need to go. They may have a place within the organization where sometimes things have to be very steady, and that nobody should be rocking the boat. You don't want to have excitement with your payroll, for example. You want to make sure that every month people get paid on time with no mistake. And that requires certain kind of skill, certain kind of talent, certain kind of personality. But you also have other more important role of helping to create the right culture and the right internal branding. And those have to be the kind of people who share a lot of passion with you and a lot of things in common with you, but who are also different enough to be able to come and tell you from time to time that maybe you're wrong, maybe you're full of crap, and maybe you just need to chill and listen.
Thank you for listening to this new episode. We are Asian Tide and we aim at inspiring you to drive your business growth in Southeast Asia by inviting progressive leaders who share with us hands-on tips and insightful lessons from their experience. If you like this episode, feel free to share it with your colleagues or your managers. Thank you for following our accounts on Spotify and Apple Podcast, and see you on the next episode of Asian Tide every Sunday.